This video is about a creative way to use markers because they're available. This is for parents or teachers who have markers and are like, now what do we do with them? You draw with them, and then what else can you do? I'm gonna show you a cool trick that looks a little bit like watercolor. So if you don't wanna do watercolor because it's messy, or maybe your kids have lost watercolor privileges, you don't want to get out the watercolors again, you don't want to wash the watercolors again, here's a process that looks like watercolor. All right, this is what you're gonna need. You're gonna need washable markers, paintbrush, water. Tip, I highly recommend water cups that have lids on them because kids knock them over all the time. What do you do for water that helps? I do not recommend glass though. Yeah, don't recommend it. Sharpie is a cool accent. I am going to be using regular copy paper because not everybody has watercolor paper, and I'm gonna show you the real. So if you're a mom or a teacher who doesn't have fancy supplies or any supplies, you can still do this, hopefully. A word of warning, if you're using copy paper, it will blend through, so make sure you have something underneath it, or make sure that you're on a surface that you don't mind getting a little ink on. What I'm doing here first is I'm just doing the outlines of objects. I'm not filling them in. You're gonna do it kind of like you do with oil pastels or chalk pastels. Less is more, because we're gonna move that around with the water. So then you get some water on your paintbrush, make sure it's really loaded up, and then you just start to move around the marker ink. You can see that I'm doing medium to small images here. This does not work so well on really large images. It just gets really watery and the marker color doesn't show up that great. Another great thing that I really love about this process is that minimal paintbrush cleanup between the colors and at the end. So if your kids struggle with cleanup, here you go. So after you're done, this is what you have. Do you see how it expands and it looks like watercolor, it looks like tie-dye, it really blends together. Now, I went ahead and I did do an example on some watercolor paper, just in case you got some donations of watercolor paper or you went out and bought some. They are a lot more saturated and you have a lot more control over where it goes. With the copy paper, it just keeps expanding without you being able to control it. But on the watercolor paper, you can really control those edges. And I also went ahead and I drew one with some Sharpie on it. And with the Sharpie, I drew that before I started the watercolor and it doesn't move at all. I'm sure you already knew that, but it's really cool to see. If you want a more defined edge, you can have them cut it out and paste it on things. If you use this technique, make sure and share it with us. I'll see you next time.